All right, today I wanted to talk about how you can think about a billion. I know, right? But bear with me. A billion is such an inconceivably large number. 1 followed by 3 sets of 3 zeros each, so 1 followed by 9 zeros. Seems inconceivably huge. All right, but we can put it into perspective. So here's what I want you to think about. I want you to think about either, I'm going to call it a mile because I live in the U.S., but you could call it a kilometer. But picture a kilometer long with stones placed every meter, or picture a mile long row of stones with stones placed every 5 feet. Either way, you have a mile or a kilometer. You can picture it any way you want. But we need 1,000 of these. So if you take a mile and you place on this mile stones every 5.28 feet, you'll have exactly 1,000 stones on your mile. Now, if you've ever walked a mile, it's longer than you think when you first start out, walking it. They're pretty big. And if you picture stones every 5.25 feet, 1,000 of them, you can really start to get your mind around what 1,000 of them would really feel like. Now, that's 1,000. We can think about 1,000. Remember, 100 is like kind of a manageable number, like, do 100 jumping jacks or whatever. But 1,000, much bigger, much harder, 10 times the size. Anyway, picture our mile with 1,000 stones on it. And now each of these stones is at the end of a column that also has 1,000 stones in it. So now, instead of having just 1,000 stones in a row, we have 1,000 rows, each of 1,000 stones in a row. Or 1,000 columns, whatever. Well, you have 1,000 rows and 1,000 columns. So anyway, you have a 1,000 by 1,000 grid of stones, right? That's a square mile. You can picture that. That's 1,000,000 stones. 1,000 by 1,000 is 1,000,000. All right. So now we're most of the way to picturing a billion. How are we going to grow 1,000,000 into a billion? Well, picture this layer, this square mile that we have of 1,000,000 stones. Now let's extend it up vertically. Well, if we go up a mile, 1,000 stones vertically, one every 5.28 feet, we're going to have 1,000 layers of 1,000,000 stones each, and that is going to give us 1,000,000,000 stones. So 1,000,000,000 stones is a cubic mile, which is a mile in this direction, a mile in this direction, and a mile straight up in the air, with stones every 5.25 feet, 1,000 stones in each direction. That 1,000 by 1,000 by 1,000 cube, that cube contains 1,000,000,000 individual stones. Now, how can we go from visualizing a billion to visualizing a trillion? Well, we're going to need to multiply some element in our original set by 1,000. And the easiest way to do that is to replace each of the stones in our original diagram with a box that has 10 by 10 by 10 stones in it. So picture sort of a cubic box, and it's got compartments in it. So you can fit 10 stones across, 10 stones this way, and 10 stones up and down. So since you have 10 by 10 by 10 matrix, you have 1,000 stones in each of these boxes. Each layer, 10 by 10 is 100, and there's 10 layers. So if we replace each of the stones in our original diagram with one of these boxes that has 10 stones by 10 stones by 10 stones in it, we'll be multiplying our billion by 1,000, and that'll give us a trillion. Now, if you want to go even higher to a quadrillion, just need to take this diagram in your brain that has 1 cubic mile in it that has 1,000,000,000,000 stones, right? 1,000 by 1,000 by 1,000, and each of the original stones has been replaced by a box that's 10 by 10 by 10 stones. Okay. So we're up to a trillion. We get to a quadrillion by placing that cubic mile into a 10 by 10 by 10 cube of cubic miles. In other words, instead of it being 1 mile tall, it's 10 miles tall. Instead of it being 1 mile wide, it's 10 miles wide. Instead of being 1 mile deep, it's 10 miles deep. So this 10 mile by 10 mile by 10 mile giant cubic box that's filled with our stones, that is going to have a quadrillion stones in it. And you can easily see how these numbers are starting to get mind-bogglingly large. Anyway, I just wanted to list some helpful ways for thinking about a billion, a trillion, and a quadrillion.